some juice to wake him up more. He doesn't like to be awake in the morning. He needs to wake up so they can start the induction meds. Yep, wake up. 1:15.
Yeah.
Water broke.
Yeah.
This is your mom trying to push you out. Your mom's hanging in there.
There's her poop. Stop crying. He's just telling you about his journey.
Joseph Mitchell Quinn Dry, but we're gonna call him Quinn for short. So this is Quinn, little Quinny boy. Hello, my YouTube family. I am so excited to be on here, finally making another video for you guys. Those of you who are on Instagram with me already know this, but you on YouTube do not. Yes, little Quinn was born into this world last week, very unexpectedly, and so I want to sit down with you guys and do a little storytelling and tell you guys all about my birth story, what happened last week. Actually, it all started about 2 weeks ago, and what the heck happened. Why was he born early? He was born 3 weeks early, and so yeah, I'm gonna go to my bedroom. The lighting's not great in there, so I apologize ahead of time, but I really need to sit down because I'm still sore from giving birth a week ago, and I need to be in my rocking chair and rock him also. So let's go into my little nursery in the corner of my bedroom, and I will tell you guys all about what happened, all the details as to why I got hospitalized, why he came at 37 weeks exactly. By the way, this is Quinn. His full name is Joseph Mitchell Quinn Dry. I know it's a mouthful, but we want to name him after both of our dads, and my maiden name is Quinn, and I have no brothers to pass on that last name, and I've always liked the name Quinn for a boy or a girl. So he's gonna go by Quinn, and then he has lots of options in the future to whatever he wants to be called, Joseph or Mitchell or whatever. So welcome to the video. I'm so sorry I have been absent on YouTube, but for obvious reasons, and I'm so excited to catch you all up on what has been happening the last couple of weeks. If you guys are brand new to my channel, thank you so much for watching. If you are not brand new, thank you so much for returning. And I'm still planning on uploading one video a week every Sunday morning, even though I got this guy now. YouTube is my priority. And for those of you who are also on Instagram with me, thank you so much for all the encouragement, all the love and support you guys gave me while I was in the hospital. You guys really got me through that really rough time. So, all right, let's head to the bedroom. I just set him down here and he seems to be okay with that. So I get to sit down with you guys hands free, and I'll keep a close eye on him. All right, you guys. Let me get comfortable. Okay, so the last time I was on here with you guys was during that Q&A video I posted all about IVF, my IVF pregnancy. And at the end of that video, I promised to do a what's in my hospital bag video. And of course, I never got around to doing that video because I got hospitalized a couple weeks ago. Thankfully, I had packed my hospital bag already just in the nick of time. I think I had packed it like 2 days before I got hospitalized. Okay, so what happened? 2 weeks ago, February 22nd, I went in for my first fetal non-stress test for this guy. Because he's an IVF baby, he's at higher risk for congenital heart defects. By higher risk, I mean like 1%. So not really that much higher than like the average baby, but they still recommended that I do these non-stress heart tests on him every week starting at 36 weeks until I deliver. February 22nd, 2 weeks ago, that was a Wednesday 2 weeks ago, I went in for my fetal non-stress test. That test went great. His heart looked good, but when they went to do my vital signs, my blood pressure was high, and it really wasn't like sky high, but it was high enough to where the doctor that was doing my testing, she was like, you know, we're gonna send you over to the hospital and they're gonna watch you over there for about an hour. They'll watch your blood pressure, they'll draw labs. My blood pressure was around 130, so say like the best reading was 138/90, I wanna say, but they kept rechecking it and it was in the 140s, 142, 145/95, over 92. So apparently they start getting worried if you're in your third trimester, like at the end of your third trimester like I was, and the top number of the blood pressure goes above 135 and the bottom number goes above 90, and mine was clearly consistently doing that, and they kept rechecking my vital signs. Granted, I was a little bit nervous. I always get nervous when I go to the doctors, even though I know everything's fine. I definitely have white coat syndrome, which is funny because I'm a nurse, but maybe I just know too much, which makes it worse. Anyways, the doctor over there that would performed his fetal non-stress test, sent me over to the hospital right across the street and wanted me to get further monitoring done. So I walked across the street and I went to the triage section of labor and delivery, where there was a couple staff waiting for me because my doctor had called them. And I went to this little area of the labor and delivery unit where they hooked me up to a baby monitor. They hooked my stomach up to a baby monitor to watch him. And then they proceeded to do my blood pressure again. And the doctor there ordered lab work. And lo and behold, my blood pressure was even higher because I knew I was so nervous. And I was like, I'm just trying to calm myself down when they put me in that little room in the hospital bed and all the equipment around me. I was like, oh my gosh, like they're really worried about me. So I was trying to like stay calm so my blood pressure wouldn't go up even higher, but lo and behold, it did. It was like 155 over like 105. And I was like, oh my gosh. So they were really worried. Baby was doing fine. Quinn was just great in my stomach the whole time. And actually throughout the hospitalization, he was very healthy. It was just me that was the problem. So blood pressure stayed high in the 150s over 100s, and they drew a bunch of lab work. They were very worried about preeclampsia is what they were looking for. So my blood pressure stayed high the whole time. I was monitored for, gosh, 2 solid hours, checking blood pressures every 15 minutes. They drew a bunch of vials of blood, checking my liver enzymes, checking my kidney function, checking all like my blood work. So the coagulation of the blood, specifically looking at the platelets. So I'm still learning all about preeclampsia, but preeclampsia can affect all of your vital organs. So they were checking on all of my organs and their function through the lab work. I also had to pee in the cup because they're looking for protein in my urine, which is another sign of preeclampsia. But because my blood pressure was so high, they kind of assumed I was going into preeclampsia. That's why they were so worried. As a lot of you know, preeclampsia is a very serious condition and basically can turn into an emergency. So I sat there for 2 hours, blood pressure stayed high, lab work came back borderline. So the labs weren't so bad. My liver looked good. My platelets were a little bit low, so they were worried about that. Protein in the urine was a little bit high, so they decided to admit me into the hospital. This was Wednesday night, like I said, February 22nd. By this time it was like 4:30 in the afternoon, and I got admitted into the high risk like mother-baby section. Even though I hadn't had my baby yet, they just kind of put me in that area. So basically it was like ICU for the OB department. At this point they told me they just wanted to watch me overnight. They wanted to watch what my blood pressure was doing. They wanted to draw more labs in the morning, and they wanted me to do this, what's called a 24-hour urine test, which means basically every time I had to pee like in a bucket and dump it into a jar, and we save that jar for 24 hours. So it's like collecting my urine over 24 hours and send that to the lab. And that's like the gold standard to finding out how much protein is in your urine for 24 hours. So I knew at that point on Wednesday evening I was going to be there at least 24 hours. But I mean, the whole kind of situation could have been worse. I had my own room. The room was beautiful. It was huge, had a huge window overlooking the park. So the room itself was great. The environment could have been so much worse. So I was thankful for that. But yeah, I just went to this OB appointment for him and ended up getting admitted to the hospital. So it was kind of a whirlwind. It was very stressful, and I didn't know how long I was going to be there for. At least I knew 24 hours at that point. So this is kind of a side note. A lot of you on Instagram have asked me where Yuma is. Because we didn't know what was going to happen at that point, I sent Josh to get Yuma from our house and bring him to his breeder. His breeder lives 3 hours east from us, and the deal was we would bring him to his breeder when I would go into labor. And the reason for that is because he's such a high energy, really kind of difficult dog to take care of, just because of his energy level, that he wouldn't do well boarded. He wouldn't do well. I would feel bad if I pawned him off to a friend or someone I didn't know, because he is such high energy, that his breeder was really the best person that he should go to, especially if it was going to be for a long period of time. So thankful we made the decision to have Josh bring him to his breeder on Wednesday night, even though it was a long drive. I think he left at like 5:30 in the evening to drive to an area called Moses Lake. It was snowing that night and icy. Luckily we have a Sequoia, so he was able to drive over there safely. But I don't think he came back until like 1 a.m. that night. So yeah, Yuma is still over at his breeder's, and I haven't worried about him at all. Thank goodness. I have such peace of mind that his breeder is taking good care of him. He's with his doggy family. His doggy mom is still with his breeder, along with a couple of his siblings. So I know he's having a lot of fun. I'm so thankful. I have peace of mind that he's being taken care of, and there's no way I could have dealt with him and his energy level bringing baby home. So he's going to be at his breeder's until the end of the month, because his breeder is training him for a show that he's going to be in, I think around March 26th. Once he's done with the show, he'll come back to us. And I think by that point, I'll be ready for him and his energy level and introduce him slowly to the baby. Anyways, that's where Yuma is. If you guys don't follow on Instagram, go ahead and follow, because I I feel like I did a pretty good job documenting my journey through the hospital. And so I gave a lot of details in different reels that I made in the hospital of what went on. So if you guys want to follow on Instagram, totally feel free to and check out those reels. But I am going to explain in more detail what happened from Wednesday all the way till Tuesday morning when I had him. So my first night, Wednesday night, was a doozy. I didn't sleep. They woke me up every 2 to 3 hours for blood pressure, and then they woke me up at 4 a.m. for more lab draws. And you know, even though they allowed me to like get up and walk around, which I was so thankful for, I was very independent in the room. Like they just kind of let me do whatever I wanted in the room. I had to be monitored pretty often. I had to get back in bed, get blood pressure checked, get him on the monitor. And so it was just like a lot of me getting checked on, which is totally how it should be. But I got no sleep on Wednesday night, and I was stressed out because like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? What's gonna happen? So then Thursday morning comes around, my OB doctor visits me and tells me, okay, we'll see how today goes. We'll see how your blood pressure does. We'll wait for the labs to come back. We'll send down your 24-hour urine collection at the end of the day and just see how much protein's in your urine. Depending on how the labs are, how your blood pressure does today, maybe we'll send you home, but maybe we'll keep you, not too sure. So all of Thursday was basically the same thing as Wednesday night, checking my blood pressure often, putting my belly on the monitor to check him every few hours on the baby monitor, which he did great the whole time, like I said, more lab draws. And then we were able to send down all of my urine for 24 hours down to the lab. That came back okay, some protein in my urine, but it was actually like within normal limits, which was a great sign. But because my blood pressure was still high, 150s over 100s, my doctor came back that evening on Thursday evening, was like, yeah, we're gonna keep you another night. We wanna monitor your blood pressure further, wanna draw your labs again in the morning, see what they're doing. My platelet count, which is like the part of the blood responsible for clotting, did drop a little bit, and that's another sign of preeclampsia. So it's like, well, let's watch you a little bit further. Thursday night was the same thing as Wednesday night, waking me up every few hours for a blood pressure check, putting him on the monitor. So not very great sleep. Friday morning comes rolling around, my OB doctor shows up again, my blood pressure's still borderline high, and he says, you know what, you have gone through so much to get this baby. Let's play it safe. Let's keep you in the hospital over the weekend. And what do you think about getting induced on your 37 weeks, which is Monday? And I was like, wow, that's really fast. And he's like, you know what, I'm gonna have another doctor come see you, a second opinion, which is the maternal fetal medicine doctor, which is like the doctor that specializes in high risk pregnancies and high risk babies. And that was the doctor that actually sent me over to the hospital in the first place. So he said, let's see what they have to say. Let's see what the maternal fetal medicine team says about your situation, and I'm gonna go with whatever they say. And I was like, okay. So then I wait a couple hours. The maternal fetal medicine doctor comes in and she said, yes, I highly recommend that you stay in the hospital over the weekend. We monitor your blood pressure and your labs closely, and then Monday morning, which is your 37 weeks, we induce you. And she was explaining that the reason for that is the cure for preeclampsia and gestational hypertension is to get the baby out. And so by Friday morning, they had definitely diagnosed me with gestational hypertension. The preeclampsia was so borderline for me because I didn't have all of the symptoms. Like I didn't swell up, my labs weren't terrible. So they diagnosed me with mild preeclampsia. It wasn't like full blown at that point, but definitely gestational hypertension. And what they're worried about is if they were to send me home over the weekend, preeclampsia, if I were to get preeclampsia, would set in super fast. It can set in within hours, and that is a true emergency. Blood pressure during preeclampsia, like full-blown preeclampsia, can go up to like 260 over 150, like basically blood pressures that can kill you. The general consensus amongst my doctors was to play it safe, keep me in the hospital for monitoring, and the benefits were outweighing the risks in just getting baby out at 37 weeks. Because 37 weeks gestation is considered term, and at that point they were reassuring me that baby would be just fine and I could get healthy again once he's out. And I'm learning a lot with preeclampsia and gestational hypertension. There's so much I still don't know, but apparently the placenta's the problem. The placenta is what's irritating the blood vessels of my body and making my blood pressure go up, and that's what's causing like preeclampsia. Even though I didn't have full-blown preeclampsia, if I did develop it, it's just that placenta is very like irritable, and it makes like the blood vessels of the body also irritable, and so it's kind of like a cascade event that makes everything spiral out of control really fast, and the cure is to get baby out. So by late Friday morning, I knew what was going to happen. I knew the plan. The plan wasn't going to change at that point. So I felt relief knowing the plan finally, because I had been in limbo land since Wednesday evening. Like, what's going to happen? Am I going to stay in the hospital? Are they going to induce me? Am I going to be able to go home and have like go into labor naturally? Like, what is happening? And so by Friday, late Friday morning, I knew the exact plan that was going to happen. Keep me in the hospital over the weekend and induce me on Monday morning. So I was feeling more relief now that I knew the plan. But then my mind started to get worried about the induction process. What does that look like? How is that going to go for me? So stayed in the hospital over the weekend. By this point, it was February 25th and 26th was the weekend. And then Monday, the 27th, they induced me. So the weekend, there was not much that happened. Just same thing, monitoring blood pressures, monitoring him, monitoring my labs, got no sleep, tried to sleep like in 2-hour increments in between them checking on me, and like the terrible lighting in the room because like the monitor screens were on all the time. And for me to sleep well, I have to be in like complete darkness, and it was just like, ugh. And then I hear noise, in the hallway, because it's the hospital, right? So you can't do anything about all those environmental like factors, but it was just really hard to get rest. By Monday morning, I was exhausted. And I was emotionally exhausted too, because it was just like a lot of stress being there. And poor Josh this whole time. Luckily, we live only 3 minutes from the hospital. So Josh was able to go back and forth between our house and the hospital, bringing me things. And I was able to wear like my PJs, and he brought me food for every meal because I didn't want to eat the hospital food. So thank God for Josh. He kept me so sane. I mean, I was going insane, but he like kept me down to earth. He was able to bring me my own things from home, and I was able to shower. He helped me shower. I had to like cover my IV with a glove, but I was pretty independent in the room. And then Josh was able to like come and bring me things and keep me company. And I was able to kind of walk the halls too, which was help get me out of the room. So it wasn't like terrible, it could have been so much worse. I could have been on bed rest, or like been attached to the baby monitor for the whole time. So it could have been so much worse. I was thankful for all those freedoms that I had while in the hospital, but it was quite a long weekend. The other thing is they were saying, this is kind of like a side note, but it was added more stress to my already stressful experience, was that they told me on Sunday evening that they were going to move me over to the labor and delivery unit at midnight, Sunday at midnight, and they were going to start the induction process then. So Josh and I were like scrambling, we're like getting the room all cleaned up, getting our stuff together so that we can have a couple hours of rest before they move me over at midnight. Got our showers in, and then my nurse came in at 11:30 to check a blood pressure and hook him up to the monitor, and then just never came back. So I was like, huh. And so then by like 2 or 3, we still hadn't moved over, and I didn't want to ask why not. Like I was assuming because of staffing. I never did find out why I didn't move over at midnight, but it was kind of like a lot of hurry up and wait. That just was stressful. But anyways, so finally I get moved over to the L&D department by 8 o'clock in the morning on Monday morning, which was February 27th. And they were able to start the induction process. And I think every induction is a little bit different. For me, my doctor prefers Cytotec, which is the medication they gave me by about 9 o'clock in the morning. They gave me an oral Cytotec, and Cytotec can be vaginal also, but it's a little tiny pill that they gave me orally to help get me going on the labor, and specifically to thin out my cervix and help with some of the contractions, like help them get them going. They started me off on a really low dose pill at 9 o'clock, and then in 3 hours they told me they were going to give me a higher dose pill, which is exactly what happened. I wasn't really feeling much, so at noon they gave me a higher dose of Cytotec pill, and then they waited 6 hours to see what my body was doing. This whole time I was hooked up to a baby monitor, the 2 bands on my belly, because they wanted to make sure he didn't go into any distress while I was on that Cytotec medication. But yeah, he did fine pretty much the whole time. There was one instance when his heart rate dropped and like 5 nurses came running in, but then he ended up being fine, so I don't know what that was all about. But by 6 o'clock in the evening, they were telling me that the monitor I was on, I was having contractions. I wasn't feeling much, but the monitor was saying that I was having contractions like every 4 minutes, every 3 minutes. So they liked that. Then my doctor came in around 6:30. This was all Monday evening, and checked me, and I was 70% effaced, and I was 1.5 centimeters dilated. And they said I was progressing far enough to where I met the criteria to start Pitocin. So by 8:30 at night on Monday night, they started IV Pitocin on me. And at first when they started the Pitocin, it wasn't bad. Like I was feeling some contractions, but didn't really feel much until about 10 o'clock. So took a couple hours for the Pitocin to kick in, and they started off really low, and then they like steadily increased it every half an hour. And by about 10, I started to feel contractions, but they weren't that uncomfortable yet to where I could still like lay in the bed and take a nap. But by midnight, I couldn't lay in the bed anymore. I had to get up. I was walking around. I was bouncing on the birth ball. I was in a squatting position. I was in a tripod position, and I was finding out that like leaning over something. So I was leaning over the birth ball. I was leaning over the bed. There was this like little blow up like beach ball type thing they would put on the bed for me. So I was leaning over that ball on the bed so my knees were on the bed. Those types of positions really helped, but I was definitely feeling it by midnight. And meanwhile, thankfully, my blood pressure still was okay. It was like in the 140s, so not high enough to start a magnesium drip or any sort of like blood pressure medications, thankfully. But my doctor kept warning me before the induction process, and same with my nurse, that if baby starts to decel, if baby starts to get into any sort of distress, if my blood pressure starts creeping up, if it gets too high, then they're going to be looking at a C-section for me. And I was so motivated not to get a C-section. So I was trying not to get the epidural because I wanted to be able to walk around. I wanted to be able to do like be in a squat position, in a tripod position, be in the bathtub. Like I wanted to progress this labor as fast as I could so I could avoid a C-section, because they kept threatening me that a C-section was a huge possibility in this circumstance because of my health and baby's health. So I was like, no, I don't want a C-section. So I wanted to be able to like walk around and move to try to get baby lower and progress and try to like get the labor going so I didn't have to do a C-section. So by about 3 a.m., I was kind of dying. Like I was hanging in there, but the contractions were coming so often that I didn't really get a break in between contractions. I would have a really bad contraction, and then I would get maybe like a 15-20 second break, and then they would come again. And I was like, I can't, it was just, the contractions were so intense. And then if I did get, because sometimes I would get a break from them, it would be like a minute and a half break. I was panicking because even though that break was so nice, I knew that next contraction was going to be a really bad one. I just recognized this pattern that my body was going through, as if I had a longer break in between contractions, that next contraction would be terrible, gut-wrenching. These contractions, you guys, I've never been in that much pain. I didn't know that kind of pain existed. And I have been through a lot of pain in my life. I've been through a lot of injuries, a lot of surgeries, a lot of health things. And so I think I have a pretty high pain tolerance, but this level of pain, you guys, I did not know existed. And then I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, so many people have natural births. Like, how do they do this? Like, lo and behold, like later on, this is kind of like a side note, but later on, I learned that Pitocin makes contractions even worse and more intense. And Pitocin makes contractions like come one after another, after another, after another, where you get no break in between. And so I was like, okay, that made me feel a little bit better, because by 5:30, so I was still laboring without an epidural. By 5:30, the contractions were so intense, lasting so long with literally no break. I would get 5 seconds break and another one would hit. I was shaking. Like mentally, basically, I was at the point where like I wanted to die. Like, I just get me out of this misery. I wanted them to knock me out, like just put me on a ventilator, put me on life support, knock me out, and wake me up when it's over. I could not do it anymore. And so I requested the epidural, but I think I waited too long because I really was at the point where I didn't know what to do. I was in panic mode, full on panic mode. I was shaking. Like, I remember just violently shaking and not being able to stop. And I remember Josh almost passed out a few times only because he was so worried about me. So I requested the epidural. Actually, I told Josh to tell the nurse who was sitting out there outside the window, like, tell her I need the epidural. Okay, I had to get a new battery. Where was I? Okay, I sent Josh to tell the nurse that I need an epidural. And she came in, a couple nurses came in, and they're like, okay, well, we have to give you some IV fluids first. And then after that, we have to check your blood pressure. And then after that, we'll call the anesthesiologist. He might take up to an hour. And I was like, no, like, I need it now. Like, you don't understand. Luckily, the anesthesiologist that I got was super fast. He came within 10 minutes of me requesting it, and he was able to put it in with me like shaking, because as probably a lot of you know, when you have to put an epidural in, you have to have the patient like be on the side of sit on the side of the bed and like hunch over a little bit. And I couldn't sit down. I mean, I managed to sit down, but I was laboring through contraction after contraction, and sitting down was like the last thing I could do. But I was able to sit down kind of and hunched over, and I was just shaking so violently. I don't know how he got it in, but he was an excellent anesthesiologist, got it in. And of course, then they made me lay down, because you have to lay down when you have an epidural. And I was like, I was just going through so many contractions, and it took an hour for the epidural to kick in. But once it kicked in, holy moly, such a relief. Of course, like my legs were going numb, which is not a great feeling, but it took the pain away and I was able to sleep for a couple of hours, which looking back, I would not have been able to push without that nap. There's no way I could have had the energy to push baby out without that nap. I was already sleep deprived, being in the hospital 5 days before going into labor. I was already like zapped of energy from all of that. And then laboring for 8 hours, there would have been no way. I would not have been able to get this baby out without the epidural. No way in hell. So they got the epidural in at 6 a.m. and then they checked me after they put the epidural in because they wanted to check me before the epidural. I was like, I can't lay down, like I can't lay flat. So luckily they got the epidural in and then they checked me after that and I was 9.5 centimeters dilated. And I was like, yes, goal met. I labored until the very end and my body was almost ready for me to push. But luckily, like they were in change of shift. They didn't want me to push yet and I was able to sleep a couple hours. Oh my gosh, you guys. Best rest ever. And Josh was able to sleep too. So both of us were able to get a couple hours of sleep before the real excitement began with pushing. So my day shift nurse comes in, and by the way, the night shift nurse was a new grad. And so I feel like I could have had a better nurse. I mean, she was a good nurse. She was very by the book, which was fine. But I felt like if I had a more experienced nurse, I would have maybe done things differently, or maybe I could have had the epidural sooner, but she really wasn't suggesting anything like outside the box or talking with me about, I don't know. So the labor and delivery nurse, that was my new nurse on day shift that came in around 8 o'clock. She had 30 years of experience, really experienced L&D nurse. And I could tell like she knew exactly what she was doing. And she had a newer nurse she was orienting. So I actually had 2 nurses, which was amazing. And that's why I got so much footage. I got so much video and pictures because the other nurse had a set of free hands. And so she was able to take a lot of footage for us. But I had 2 nurses. I had excellent care. And by the time they were ready for me to push, it was 8:45 in the morning. So I started pushing at 8:45 and Quinn was born at 10:12. So I pushed, I guess, for about an hour and a half, which wasn't too bad. And even despite the epidural in me, oh, he's starting to fuss. They set up a bar over my bed and they let me be in a squat position. Even though I had an epidural, I had enough feeling in my legs where I could be in a squat position and hold on to the bar and push in a squat, which was amazing because gravity could help me get him out. But then when my OB doctor came in, he's very traditional. He wanted me to labor on my back, which was fine. I just felt like I was making more progress in a squat position. So I laid back on my back. But the problem with being on my back is I had such bad acid reflux with him that it just being on my back, like all the acid was in my throat. I felt like I could push more if I wasn't dealing with acid reflux, and I was trying not to throw up, which I did throw up once. But luckily, it all worked out. I was able to push him out by 10:12, and lo and behold, guys, this guy at 37 weeks exactly weighed 7 pounds 1 ounce and 21 inches long. And I was like, I'm actually glad now that he came early, because if we had waited until like 40 weeks or 39 weeks, he would have been a 9-10 pound baby. And I had a hard time pushing him out as it is. Like he had his kind of, as his head was crowning, I kind of was at the point where I was stuck. And so he had a big bruise on the top of his head and like a really bad cone head when he came out. He's fine now, but I had a hard time pushing him out. And so I was like, there's no way I could have if he was like larger than that. So he came out pooping. They put him on my chest and they didn't realize how much he was pooping until they went to do his assessment on my chest, and I was covered in meconium, covered in poop. I mean, it was everywhere, all over him, all over me. So they got him cleaned up, and then when they went over to weigh him, he pooped again. By the time they weighed him, he was 7 pounds 1 ounce, but he actually was heavier than that because he had pooped so much before they weighed him. And yeah, he looked healthy, he did great. And I only had 3 first-degree tears, so I don't know how many stitches I have, but not very many. And so by now, this is I'm 9 days postpartum today. I'm barely bleeding anymore, just maybe some spotting, and I do feel like my stitches down there, but they're not painful anymore. The most I was feeling was a lot of vaginal pressure. Like I felt like my uterus was gonna fall out. That was like the main symptom I had down there. And now like I feel way less pressure. Apparently they're telling me it takes 6 weeks to heal, but maybe even longer than that. So I'm just kind of relaxing, and it's hard for me to like not move my body and like do a workout or walk. But when I walk around for too much, like if I walk around for more than a few minutes, I do start feeling that vaginal pressure. So I know that the recovery is kind of a longer process, but so far so good. The recovery for me has been really good. Yeah, so this was all Tuesday morning, February 28th, when he got delivered. And then Tuesday afternoon, they moved me to the postpartum floor. So I also had my own room over there, which was really nice. Smaller room, but at least it was my own room, and Josh had his own like pull-out bed. So they kept me there for only one night, and the next day, which was March 1st, Wednesday, they sent me home. So my blood pressure was still kind of high, 140s, 150s. So they sent me home with a blood pressure med called labetalol that I take twice a day. And I'm supposed to check my blood pressure every day. So I have my cuff right here, so I remember to check it every day. And because I nurse him so often in this chair, and I look over there and my blood pressure cuff is there. And since I've been home, my blood pressure's still been in the 140s, on a good day, high 130s. I was warned it would stay high for a while, at least a few weeks, maybe even longer than that, and it might even rebound and get higher for a period of time. Hasn't really rebounded, but it hasn't gotten any better either. So I'm a little bit worried about that part. But other than that, I feel good. Just very sleep deprived from being in the hospital for so long. And now I'm sleep deprived because he wakes me up every 2 to 3 hours to feed. And I am exclusively breastfeeding right now. That's been my top priority, is to breastfeed him. I did not want formula. If my body was able to produce milk and respond okay, I was highly motivated to breastfeed. And I'm not against formula. I'm not against the bottle. I'm not against anything whatsoever. I just really wanted to try to breastfeed as much as I could. And so far that's been going a lot easier than I thought. I have a lot of support from like a few lactation nurses that have seen me so far, but I do have a lactation nurse that comes to my house and checks on me, and I text her if I have any problems. Quinn does have a tongue tie, so that's one reason why it's been a little bit painful. I mean, other than the fact that I'm getting used to him on me, so nipple soreness is going to be very normal at this point, but his suck is pretty painful, and so we are looking into correcting that. So yeah, that is my birth story in a nutshell. This whole time I had a feeling he would come early. I just didn't know how that was going to look or how that was going to happen, but that's what happened. I went to my doctor's appointment thinking I would come home after that, and I did not. And now I have this little tiny human I'm staring at. As I always tell you guys, you know, he's my little miracle. He's something I thought would never happen to me. And even though I had to go through all the IVF trauma, and then I had to go through the trauma of hospitalization and the health scares, now that he's here, it was all worth it. So I do want to do a video on why IVF pregnancies are high risk. I learned so much being in the hospital. All the nurses were really good at educating me, and the doctors were good at educating me, telling me why IVF pregnancies are higher risk than normal pregnancies. I didn't know. I knew that IVF pregnancies were like higher risk pregnancies, but I didn't really understand why. And now I know so much about all that. I'm still learning, so of course I'm not an expert, but I really want to share with you guys why IVF pregnancies put you at higher risk. Yeah, I learned that IVF pregnancies make you higher risk for gestational hypertension, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, and I really had no idea. I just thought that maybe because of my age, I was in the higher risk category, and like the risk of placental rupture goes up if you go past your due date with an IVF pregnancy, but I didn't know about all of the other stuff. And as you age, those risk factors just go up. So I'm already advanced maternal age, and so that sets me up for higher risk for all that stuff. So yeah, I think that's gonna be my next video, is what I learned in the hospital regarding IVF pregnancies and the high risk category. I do still want to do a video on what's in my hospital bag, because I definitely overpacked. You don't really need that much stuff in your hospital bag because the hospital provides a lot of it for you. But then there were some things that I used that I didn't think I would need either. So I want to do a video on like what I actually used out of my hospital bag. And so maybe that'll help some of you guys who are looking into like packing your hospital bag soon, and really what I use, like what you really need and what you really don't need. So let me know if you want me to do that video. I think that would be kind of neat. And then in the comments below, let me know what other videos you want to see. I am planning on doing a breastfeeding journey video in the future. That'll be in the way future though, because I'm just starting my breastfeeding journey. But I think it would also be fun to do a video sooner than later, because he's already growing, on like life with a newborn and how I've been navigating all of that and getting used to life with a newborn. I also did a little nursery tour already on Instagram, but I can do a nursery tour on YouTube if you want. It's not really a nursery. It's a corner of my bedroom that I've been using because I don't have a room for a nursery at this point. We did buy a house house and we're renovating it still. And so once we move into our house, I will have a nursery. But this little dedicated like space, this little corner of my bedroom has been working out perfectly. Everything's within reach. This chair is great for nursing. I have this little shelf for all my things. I have a changing table, I have diaper stuff, and that's really all I need. I have a great bassinet that I am in love with, and that's all you need. Newborns don't need a whole lot. They just need the essentials. They don't need a lot of space because they're always with you. Even if you have a room for them, they're not going to sleep in that room because you're going to want them with you. So I can do it like a little tiny nursery tour on here if you guys want that. But let me know what you want to see from me now that I have this baby, and any IVF informational videos that I haven't done yet, let me know. Thanks again, you guys, for all of your love and support, and I look forward to doing more videos in the future. This guy was so worth it all, and like I said, never give up on your IVF journey. Never give up on your infertility. Hang in there, keep going, like I always say, because you just never know what the future has for you, and if you give up, then you just don't know. You might have lost out on that opportunity that life gives you. Okay, all the love from me to you guys. Hit the thumbs up button if you liked this video because it really helps support my channel. I will see you in the next one, and always remember to be kind to yourself.